Well, it sounds like Superman's gotten another round of test screenings, and with that, some pretty interesting details are starting to come out, specifically about some surprise villains. Given what we know, I think we can figure out who they might be, so let's take a couple minutes to talk about the story and which baddies might surprise us this July. Now, if you've been paying attention, you've probably heard that there have been some Superman test screenings. These are often presented to friends and family, people that work for the studio, and helps James Gunn and his team of creatives to kind of cobble together what's going to work and be released into theaters for fans. It's pretty common practice, and we're starting to get some details from some of these test screenings. Now, these details obviously don't come from James Gunn or anybody within DC Studios, so it's the obvious standard grain of salt. This actually comes via a Portuguese fan site, but has been picked up and confirmed by many other Hollywood insiders. Another thing to keep in mind is this is a test screening. A test screening means things will be changed, almost assuredly. And we often get details about movies and test screenings that turn out to not be 100% accurate. So even if this unconfirmed report is true now, it might not be true later. Now, as far as the quality of the movie goes, we're hearing quite good things. The report even saying it was funny and adorable and closer to the Wonder Woman film and first Guardians of the Galaxy, which is an interesting balance to strike and sounds very James Gunn to me. Now, John Campea actually said he heard it was tremendously good and is emotional and funny, with a lot more sci-fi elements than you would expect. And that's where this interestingly ties into the report, because that perked my ears. Now, the same report indicated there's going to be surprise villains. And since we already know of several Superman villains set to appear, with Lex Luthor and what appears to be Ultraman, and maybe even an antagonistic relationship with the Engineer, it sounds like we might be getting some well-known Superman villains in this movie that we're not expecting. Now, some of them to me seem pretty obvious, and if that is a clone of Superman as Ultraman, well, if I'm making any guesses, he definitely devolves into Bizarro. This is sometimes a path we've seen the Bizarro story take, and very reminiscent of what happened in Superman the Animated Series. So that one itself is right on the surface and very obvious to me. And I don't really see that as a surprise, but there's a lot of space for other surprises. Now, I don't think we're going to get General Zod. He's been used over and over again, and I'm very, very sure Gunn just threw him off the table right out of the gate. I also don't think there's any possibilities that Darkseid is part of this, although we could see one of his minions. That's definitely a grander story Gunn will be saving for later on, so I would put him back up on the shelf. But I do think there's a possibility of Brainiac. Now, we heard rumors about Brainiac very early on when this movie was being developed, and they seem to have faded out. Since we know there's a big part of this film focusing on Superman's Kryptonian heritage, that's why it was originally called Legacy, Brainiac is a pretty solid guess and would definitely be at the top of my list as big surprises for the movie. Now, for Brainiac, how big that turns out to be, well, that's the big question. And he might only show up in sort of a surprise capacity towards the end, setting up a larger storyline for the DCU. Now, honestly, if there's some surprise villains in this, I actually think they might be more terrestrial based and might just serve as a function for one scene. Characters like Parasite and Toyman could kind of fit this role, but one of them stands out in particularly to me, and that's Metallo. Now, we did hear some rumors about Parasite as part of this project, but he doesn't tie to the story nicely how Metallo could. Now, Metallo's been in DC Comics for a really, really long time, being mentioned way back in 1942, but the John Corbin version of Metallo actually appeared in the Superman comic strip, The Menace of Metallo, way back to 1959. Now, his first appearance in DC Comics was Action Comics 252 in 1959, so he is a huge long with Superman, and it's kind of sad he's never made it to the big screen. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Metallo, he's basically a cyborg whose power source is a piece of kryptonite, and he has slugged it out many, many times with Superman in the comics. Now, I suspect they'll do their own take on his origin story. It actually goes back so far, and I wouldn't be surprised if they were inspired by the animated series. That's how Lex Luthor basically turned John Corbin into Metallo, and you could totally see Metallo, who will definitely lose to Superman, being kind of an early slugfest for the Man of Steel, and a predecessor to Ultraman, who is a full-fledged clone. You could definitely see how somebody like Lex Luthor will be working out multiple versions of some kind of warrior to take on Superman. A clone is a natural path, but so is a cyborg. And this fits so well into the overall story that I really do think it's something Gunn could go with. Now, we saw no signs of Metallo, or quite honestly, any other villains during all those set pictures that were dropped during outdoor filming. So we really don't have any direct evidence that Metallo or any other surprise villain is part of the project. Obviously, Lex and what appear to be Ultraman are confirmed, but even Gunn hasn't made that absolutely clear beyond Lex. So we're going to follow this one pretty closely, because I do feel like once we get to the merch leak stage, we might start getting some clues on this mystery, and that'll give us our final answer. When that happens, we're going to have to wait and see. Now, before you take off though, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, and don't forget to ring the bell for all the updates. We do daily Marvel and DC videos, and we want to be your place for all the real, truthful superhero news, and we're going to bring it to you truthfully and transparently so you are really in the know.